I met a strange lady, she made me.
Hi everyone, a very warm welcome to this rather unusual celebration of Australia Day, the first time in our 34-year history that we've done so virtually, but this has been a year of many firsts. A big thank you to our sponsors, ANZ and CK Infrastructure, without whom this event would not be possible. I know there are many of you joining from Australia, from Hong Kong and from across the region. My name is Jacinta Redden. I'm Chief Executive at AustCham. A very warm welcome. It's been a long time between drinks. For all of us, the annual Australia Day celebration has been an occasion to come together as a nation. And living overseas, I think, gives us an even clearer perspective at just what it means to be Australian. One of our best known expatriates, Clive James, who lived for close to 60 years outside Australia and whose father, in fact, is buried here in Hong Kong, spoke longingly about his love for the nation despite all those decades of living in the UK. It's a longing which many of us feel even more keenly in this time of COVID. And so to all of you, may we celebrate our remarkable country, recognising and celebrating our Indigenous Australians and the survival of the world's oldest living culture on earth. To those of you here in Hong Kong, flying the flag, whether as dual passport holders or as Australians who have called Hong Kong home. And to members of the community watching in Australia and around the region, welcome. We have fantastic speakers coming to you in the next hour or so, but first, a reminder of where we were this time last year.
Good afternoon to you all. I'm disappointed not to be with you today, but this is a very different world to when Jacinta invited me to come over and speak with you back in February. I'm still watching events as they unfold in Hong Kong from the distance of my safe haven here in Byron Bay, and I'm looking forward to meeting you all in person at some point when the worst of the pandemic is over and we can look forward to a more normal life again. In the meantime, have a great day.
Of course, you remember that we had invited Kerry O'Brien to be our in-person guest speaker last year, and we were forced to cancel that event just days out. Since then, many of us have been separated from family and friends. Working from home, life has been disrupted. And for those of us in Hong Kong, of course, that disruption actually began with the protests 6 months earlier than the rest of the world. I know many of you watching have been apart from family. Some of you are even watching this in quarantine. There are grandparents who have not met their Hong Kong-born grandchildren. Husbands and wives and children are separated. Business travel is at a halt. It's been tough. But so the role of the AustCham community is even more important. We are indeed stronger together, and there's never been a more important time to come together at AustCham. And so, what better way to face adversity here at AustCham than with a bit of humour? We bring you the Australian Glam ad.
Today marks 10 years since our once united nation was divided by the Great State Walls as tensions continue to escalate. An increasing number of Victorians have applied for weather asylum in the Northern Territory, while Queensland stands now.
What's on the other side, Mummy?
They're called Queenslanders.
Sydney's here.
Reporting live with the man who started it all.
I just wanted some lamb.
I love the smell of lamb in the morning.
Doreen!
Phil!
I waited for you.
So, this is Julio.
See? Told you they were different.
WA, you made it.
Yeah. Sorry for trying to become our own country. Again.
Even the Tasmanians have arrived. Where are the rest of you?
This is all of us.
We did it. The United States of Australia.
That's fantastic. We hope that you're celebrating Australia Day in your own special way. Here at AustCham, we've managed to celebrate with some sausage rolls, vanilla slices, and also I want to say a big thank you to the terrific team who worked so hard, again, in difficult circumstances in the past year, just as you all have. And despite COVID, we've managed to keep ourselves really busy together with you, our members. So let's just take a look at a summary of the past year. Thank you. It's been a busy year despite the disruption, which we know is the same for many of you. A critical part of our success during the year is the support of platinum patrons such as ANZ. There's a lot that you don't see of the support that we get from platinum patrons and today's sponsor ANZ that goes on behind the scenes. We're incredibly grateful to Farhan Faruqi and his team, Peter Chan at ANZ. I'd now like to introduce Farhan Faruqi, Group Executive International ANZ, to introduce the Australian Consul-General, Elizabeth Ward. Thank you, Farhan. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Jacinta. I do want to say that my Australian colleagues show me the lamb ad every year to help me assimilate. So I really enjoyed that this year. Thank you for that. Hello, everyone. I hope you're all keeping well. I think the interesting thing about this virtual event and you know is not the strangeness of this is not the fact that we're doing it virtually in the manner we are instead of meeting physically, but the strangeness really comes from the fact that we don't find it strange anymore. So this is indeed the new world and the new normal. So I do want to congratulate the Chamber on their efforts in pulling together a fantastic agenda today. Despite the current COVID situation, Jacinta, you and the team at AustCham are really my heroes for putting something like this together. So congratulations on that. As Jacinta pointed out, ANZ have had the privilege to have partnered with the Chamber for more than 2 decades, and it has been an incredible partnership. It's always played a critical role in connecting our business to ideas, to people, and of course, the significant opportunity in Hong Kong and across the region. As we ease in 2021, and I say that with caution, at ANZ, we are certainly approaching the year with cautious optimism. We know there will be challenges, but I think we are far better prepared to face into those challenges. And if nothing else, 2020 has taught us to always expect the unexpected and that planning is important, but agility will matter the most as we go into 2021. There is opportunity out there. It certainly looks a little different, but as Australia's most international bank, we've committed to helping our customers in the region connect with these opportunities and find growth in this COVID world that we live in. Now, a few years ago at this event, I had the pleasure of interviewing former Australian Foreign Minister Julie Bishop. And today I have the honor of welcoming another esteemed official of the Australian government, the newly appointed Australian Consul-General to Hong Kong and Macau, Elizabeth Ward. Elizabeth, I should mention to you that when I interviewed Julie Bishop, we had a very intense rapid fire question round with her. We won't subject you to that now, but be prepared, that will come some point in the future. The timing of Elizabeth's arrival in Hong Kong last year has meant that many of us have not had the opportunity to meet her in person and spend time with her. So I did want to take this opportunity to share a little about her background, and it's very extensive, so I'm only giving you the highlights. Elizabeth has very deep experience in trade and investment policy. She was the chief negotiator for the Australia-Hong Kong Free Trade Agreement and the associated investment agreement. She led the negotiations on behalf of Australia in the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and she has held senior diplomatic positions in Washington, D.C., New Delhi, and Cairo. With this significant and impressive global experience, I'm very much looking forward to hearing her views on the path forward for Hong Kong. So it is with absolute pleasure that I would like to welcome the new Australian Consul General to Hong Kong and Macau, Elizabeth Ward, to deliver her first address to the Chamber. So with that, Elizabeth, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Farhan. Thank you so much, Farhan. And hello to everyone watching. It's great to be with you on a glorious day in Hong Kong. That was a lovely introduction, Farhan. I hope I can do justice to my new role. Thank you, Jacinta and AustCham for hosting me today. This year, the theme of Australia Day is Reflect, Respect, Celebrate. And I've been thinking about that this week. Australia Day is an opportunity for us to reflect on how we became the diverse and dynamic nation we are. It's time to show respect to each other, to our different cultures and traditions, and to our ancestors. Australia is an ancient land, and the first Australians are the custodians of the land and of an ancient culture. For more than 65,000 years, Indigenous Australians have carried forward what is today the oldest continuous culture in the world. We respect and nurture that, and we're deeply proud of it. We acknowledge that for many Indigenous Australians, Australia Day is a painful one. At the same time, Australia is one of the world's most multicultural nations. Australians come from every nation of Earth, on Earth, not least Asia, and that diversity makes us strong. Waves of migrants have brought with them their own perspectives, skills and traditions, and through their drive and their sacrifices contribute to the image of modern Australia. In our country, we define ourselves not by how we look or how we talk, but by our values. It's our idea of a fair go, of mateship, our generosity and willingness to dig in times of need to help out. It's our noisy democracy, and it's the freedoms we enjoy and protect. We know we're not perfect, far from it, but we learn from our mistakes, and we may often disagree on how to move forward, but we are bound together by our shared sense of community and our respect for each other. Australia Day is about celebrating our successes and the impact we as Australians have had on the world. As a country and as individuals, we've always sought to make the world a better place. We're explorers, we're inventors, we're traders, we're pioneers. We gave the world Wi-Fi, the first cervical cancer vaccine, the bionic ear, and Google Maps, to name a few, but I'm sure you already know that. We also have played and continue to play a key role in building the institutions that bind the globe's community of nations. We've helped to shape the international rules of the road in the United Nations and the World Trade Organization, to name just a couple, that have served Australian interests and the global community since the Second World War, and we continue to uphold and work to improve those rules. The Australian community here in Hong Kong is a testament to all of the things that make us a great country. In you, for those of you that I've met, I see the diversity, resourcefulness, the values and the drive that has made our nation such a success. And through that drive, Australians have contributed to making Hong Kong a success too. There's something about Australians and Hong Kongers that just seems to click. Somehow the friendly, transactional efficiency that are a hallmark of both of our economies makes it easy for us to get along. But of course it goes deeper than that. We are both places with a history of migration. We obviously both see our futures firmly and our focus firmly in the Asian region. We're both attractive to international companies. We're innovators. We both host an impressive education sector. In fact, in 2019, because somehow we're not counting 2020, Australia had 7 universities in the top 100. And we both benefit from a skilled and diverse talent base. In fact, around 44% of Australia's workforce has a tertiary qualification. There's no doubt, of course, that 2020, now that we're talking about it, has been a terribly challenging year for both Australia and Hong Kong as we consider our respective places in the world. Geostrategic challenges have become increasingly sharp-edged and are fearsomely complex to navigate. Australia's approach will continue to be guided by our interests and values, and we will engage with our partners with openness, honesty, clarity, and respect. More broadly, 2020 has become synonymous with calamity. We've had to invent new playbooks for healthcare in a pandemic and how to run a services-based economy without people movement. We've learned to work from home while simultaneously educating our kids and holding functions like this one via Zoom. And for many of you here, I want to acknowledge upfront the frustrations and the worries of being separated from friends and family in Australia. We are in the midst of the most difficult of moments, and there's little about the world that looks normal right now. While Australia and Hong Kong have been among the most successful in the world at combating COVID-19, we all share the same global exhaustion. 2021 is unlikely to be a walk in the park, and we shouldn't fool ourselves into thinking this will be over imminently. But with the development and rollout of vaccine, those glimmers of hope grow brighter. I encourage you to keep an eye on the Australian Consulate's Facebook page and website for updates on the pandemic, related restrictions, travel caps, and our travel advice. As we have through this crisis, we'll keep you updated as soon as we are aware of relevant information. And we, like you, want to see things recover as soon as possible. We're working daily with the government in Canberra toward that goal. In the Consulate's online Australia Day celebration, which I encourage you to tune into on our Facebook page, I talked of Australia as a nation of many stories. On my first Australia Day here as Consul-General in Hong Kong and Macau, I want to recognise the many individual stories, your stories, that have contributed to making the Australia-Hong Kong partnership so rich and dynamic. And as we reflect on, respect, and celebrate those human linkages, I'm confident that we can overcome the challenges of today to build success for tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, and thank you, Farhan. Again, I think, Elizabeth, those who joined us in person when we last held this event in person at the Shangri-La, in which Farhan did do the quick questionnaire with Julie Bishop, the former Foreign Affairs Minister, it really was very memorable. So thank you again to Farhan of ANZ and Elizabeth, our Consul-General. We do look forward to you all having the opportunity to meet our Consul-General, Elizabeth Ward, in person. So again, on behalf of all of us, Elizabeth, we know it's been a tough start to you for the post. A very warm welcome to you and to your husband, Bryce, to Hong Kong. And now I'm very pleased to introduce to you two public health experts to talk to you about the subject that's been occupying all our minds for the past year. The ABC's Dr. Norman Swan, the ABC being a long-standing partner with the Chamber, and we're very grateful to them for their ongoing support, and Professor Vivian Lin. Dr. Norman Swan is physician, journalist and ABC broadcaster. He's been the trusted voice on the pandemic during the past year and hosts a daily podcast on the coronavirus. Norman is also a reporter and commentator on the ABC's 7:30, Midday, News Breakfast and Four Corners. He created Invisible Enemies on Pandemics and Civilization for Channel 4 UK, which was broadcast in 27 countries. Norman was awarded the Medal of the Australian Academy of Science and has an honorary MD from the University of Sydney. He is also a recipient of the Australian Skeptics Journalism Award 2020, an award, Norman, that I just love the sound of. I think we can all enjoy a bit more skepticism these days when we receive our news. Norman trained in medicine and paediatrics in Aberdeen in Scotland and London and Sydney before joining the ABC. Professor Vivian Lin, who is a member of AustCham, an Executive Associate Dean and Professor of Public Health Practice at the Li Ka-shing Faculty of Medicine here at the University of Hong Kong. Professor Lin has more than 30 years' experience in health policy and program development, health planning and public health teaching and research. Vivian was previously Professor of Public Health and Head of the School of Public Health at La Trobe Uni in Melbourne, and is the author of several leading public health textbooks in Australia and numerous articles on health issues in Australia, China, and indeed globally. Vivian has also worked at senior levels in health policy across Australia, including as Executive Officer of the National Public Health Partnership. She has consulted for the World Bank, the UK Department for International Development, for AusAid, as well as the World Health Organization, and has served on multiple academic, government, community and editorial boards. But first, Norman, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jacinta. And thanks very much for having me. Sorry, I can't be there in person. So before I start, I can sympathize with many of you who are separated from family, from your kids, and from your friends, and in this uncertain world. My youngest daughter is living and working in Singapore. I haven't seen her for 18 months. My son is a journalist, White House reporter in Washington. Haven't seen him for well over a year. And they've had a little baby girl. And I'm hoping that I'll see this little baby girl before she starts college at some point in the future. I'm only just being slightly facetious about that, but it is tough. And there's only so far that you can go with Zoom. So I think we can underestimate just the effect this has had on us all psychologically. And just by the fact that we're on this webinar, we are amongst the better off, we're the more privileged. And there are many people in our communities, both in Hong Kong and China and Australia, who have done it tough. And we should just pause to think about that for a moment, because it's going to get tougher. The modelling has shown, at least in Australia, and I imagine it will be similar in Hong Kong, is that the economic effects, and Hong Kong obviously is more complex because of the political situation, but that the distress caused by dislocation, particularly to young people, I'm talking particularly about Australia, about this disruption to education, about reduced job opportunities, is that even though the distress levels have been high during the first wave and indeed the second wave in Victoria here in Australia, the effects will actually be worse this year going through to June or July and peaking then. So a lot of psychological distress around. And I think, as I said before, even for us, it's hard and sometimes really tough emotionally. So, and we've all just got to look after ourselves. I just wanted, you probably know as much as me, but I just wanted to just take us through, it's probably 14, 15 months since the first case of SARS-CoV-2 in Australia, the first infection. Almost certainly it was in the countryside in China somewhere, caught from a bat. There was a point, if it was 14 months ago, 15 months ago, but there was a point when there was only one person in the whole wide world with what we now know as COVID-19. And look how many millions have been affected, how many millions have died, and how many more millions have got what they call long COVID, which is the extended symptomatology that people have after infection, particularly those who've not necessarily had very severe infection, and they find themselves with this syndrome that's becoming increasingly recognized. The origins, there's a WHO team in China, at Wuhan, as we speak, just got out of quarantine, looking at the origins. They won't find anything. Unfortunately, they're going through the motions, but they'll never find the cause of this, largely because teams had to really get in about a year ago to find out what was going on. You'll hear conspiracy theories that this was an escape from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. That's not what happened. You can't exclude it entirely, but that's not what happened. That's an excellent Institute of Virology, by the way. It's really world class. They know what they're doing. And they were experimenting on bat coronaviruses. And in fact, what they did maybe about 3 years ago now is that they did what's called gain of function studies on them. That's where they genetically manipulate the virus to see if they could turn it into a pandemic virus. And they found out actually how you could do that. But the virus they did that to was not the same virus that SARS-CoV-2. And those people in the know were not surprised that the next pandemic was coronavirus. There was, if you like, I'll call it a war game. It was more like a germ game in the United States, maybe 2 years ago now. I think it was 2018, where they gamed the next pandemic. And the next pandemic was not, the one they gamed was not influenza, it was a coronavirus. They were expecting a coronavirus to happen. It's got all the features that unfortunately happen with a pandemic, because a pandemic really does require respiratory spread, where it goes through the air, it goes through droplets, goes through your breath, gets circulated in the air. What really turned this one into a major pandemic were several factors. One is it hit the world at a time of unprecedentedly poor multilateral relations, where you had authoritarian leaders in various countries, including in democracies, who were fragile, and international cooperation was at an all-time low. And people were nervous, looking over countries were nervous, looking over their shoulder, feeling put upon, and cooperation was almost non-existent. And it was each country for themselves. And unfortunately, you're seeing that again now with vaccine nationalism. And therefore, the sort of cooperation that you need, and in fact that you got with SARS-CoV-1, SARS-1, where you did actually have an international effort, didn't occur. But the other advantage with SARS-CoV-1 was that it only spread when people had symptoms. So it was relatively easy to control, even though it was highly infectious. Luckily, it was easier to control because it had a much higher mortality rate. And about 8,000 people had it, and about 800 or 900 people died. So about 9 or 10% mortality rate. MERS, which is another version of the coronavirus, has an even higher mortality rate, 30%, but is not as infectious. So this one, we're lucky and unlucky. We're unlucky that it's so contagious. We're unlucky that it's got a mortality rate that's several times that of seasonal flu, but it's not up there with mortality rates of SARS-1 or MERS. It would be a disaster of plague, Black Death proportions, if indeed it had. And what you saw was it landing on some countries like Hong Kong, like Taiwan, like Singapore, South Korea, and other places which had experienced SARS-1 and knew that this was not going to be anything like the flu, where you had to act swiftly, you had to act decisively, and you had to get it under control. China as well, sorry, I didn't include China. And China reacted very decisively and got it under control, sometimes controversially, but certainly got it under control. And if you believe the figures, there are really not that many cases, although authorities are petrified, I imagine, about Chinese New Year coming up and the circulation that that's going to cause as maybe a super spreading event. It went underground. So it arrived in the United States when there was this appalling administration there, and which had a pandemic plan, but one of the first things that the Trump administration did when it came in is it threw out the Obama pandemic plan. It sacked a lot of the expertise in the Centers for Disease Control, and so when this came along, they had no plan, and they had not the same. Didn't have the expertise. And when it arrived, or somebody arrived from Wuhan in Washington State, for example, there were no testing facilities, there were rigid rules. The test kits didn't work. It went underground in Washington State and popped up again at a time when they tried to do the right thing, but they weren't prepared for it. And so this virus. I saw a video the other day of Mike Pence saying we've only had 15 cases. We've only got 15 cases because they weren't doing any testing. Even in Australia, with all our successes, people saying, oh, well, we didn't need to lock down because we only had so few cases. We only had so few cases at the beginning of the first wave in Australia because we weren't testing. We didn't actually know how many cases there were. And it was that early lockdown that really got it under control in Australia, as well as the control of the borders. So you've had this pandemic spread through a world that was unprepared and not cooperating. So you saw it going to northern Italy, terrible epidemic there, appalling epidemic stroke pandemic in the United States, the worst country in the world for this in terms of deaths per head, and the UK, a country with good public health facilities, a universal healthcare system, an appalling response to it because they were badly advised, very badly advised, and they believed that the way to go was herd immunity. Just let the virus rip and get immunity, and then that will take it under control. The people who advised the government on this are still there. And there's been these stop, start, changing policies and so on, rather than a consistent policy. Curfews, stopping, closing bars at 8 o'clock at night, these things do not work. If you're going to control this virus, there's only one thing that works if it's out of control, and that is a lockdown, and a really serious lockdown, like we've had in Australia, like you've had at times in Hong Kong and New Zealand and elsewhere. Complete lockdown to stop this virus spreading, because it spreads asymptomatically. And that's why it's been such a pandemic, because you don't know who's got it. And then while you're locking down, you get your testing infrastructure, your contact tracing, and your isolation into place. And you institute border controls. And another problem that we've had is that the World Health Organization has really not done a good job. They were not tough enough at the beginning. They were too ready to compromise. They didn't accept that there was aerosol spread, so they really believed it was close quarter stuff with droplets. When that is how it spreads to some extent. But if you're in the same room as somebody that's not well ventilated, or a restaurant, you can get this downwind. In Australia, there was spread in Melbourne hospitals where the ventilation wasn't right. And so you had a patient in one room where they thought the circulation of the air was outside. It was actually vented into the corridor, and people at a nursing station meters away were catching COVID-19, the virus. And the World Health Organization has given very poor advice. And in fact, the Commonwealth's infectious control expert group has given very poor advice to the Commonwealth on infection control, which is one reason why 3,500 healthcare workers in Victoria in the second wave were infected. Having said that, we've done well. The Lowy Institute this week released their analysis of a league table of nations and why some nations did better than others. And it's not related to whether you're a democracy. It seems to be related to trust in government, trust in leadership, and a small population. So having a small population, a manageable population. And in fact, if you look at Australia, while it's 25 million people, it was a response that was really in each jurisdiction, in each state. So small populations of between 1 and 8 million people, and that much more manageable. And in fact, the states are what controlled the pandemic, or people who controlled the pandemic in Australia and who locked down early rather than the Commonwealth. And the state premiers have got a lot to be thanked for. And then the other thing that's so marvelous about this pandemic is the state of science, where the first genome was published early January, thanks to a cooperation between Eddie Holmes at the University of Sydney and Chinese researchers in Wuhan. And within days of that, literally days, you had vaccine manufacturers, vaccine developers already designing the first vaccine. So the first vaccine designs were already, on the cards at the end of January. You had testing kits ready. America was the exception. Other places had developed testing kits which were reasonably accurate and did the job. And the world, and scientifically, the world has responded. And look where we are. 1 year after, almost exactly to the day after the first case in Australia, we're around the world, we're starting to implement vaccination programs, not without controversy, and we can talk about that in our discussion, but it is just truly amazing. In an environment where normally 9 out of 10 vaccines fail, so far we've only had 1 vaccine fail, sorry, 2. The rest, it's a small number so far, but large number coming through later. And we're already immunizing, and Israel's already immunized well over 20% of its population. It's extraordinary. And whether that's going to release us into a normal life is something that perhaps Vivian and I can talk through. So it's been extraordinary. The effects are widespread. The effects are economic too. So one of the arguments is, well, by going to lockdown, you're minimizing, you're not understanding the economic effects of unemployment and so on, and that those are going to be bigger than the pandemic itself. It's actually not true. We know this from the 1918-19 pandemic in the United States. Cities that locked down early and did the right public health thing were the ones where their economies bounced back early. And the countries which did respond well in the first wave and did not suffer badly are the ones that are rebounding back and doing well, with some exceptions. So by taking a public health approach, we've saved economies as well, and many governments have responded well to this by giving income support, helping people through if they're going to lockdown, actually help them through these difficult times. But Elizabeth was right. 2021 is not necessarily going to be an easy year, and we should not take our eye off the ball either in terms of the virus, because it's going to be a long time before enough people are immunized, or off the economy and what we need to do. And I'm talking to people who you are all deeply enmeshed in the economy, finance, and what keeps the wheels of the economy both in Hong Kong and Australia turning. And it's a huge responsibility. So I might stop there, take questions from you, and have a discussion with Vivian Lin.
Thank you very much. Lots of content in that. Vivian, we'll turn to you now, and I would encourage all of you watching, you have an opportunity to ask questions by either doing so in the Q&A box, typing the question in, or raising your hand using the same function, and we'll come to your questions verbally. But Professor Vivian Lin, over to you to lead the conversation, and I'll join you in that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jacinta, and thank you, Norman. That was really a masterful, I think, summary of all the different issues. And you've really touched on so many things that I've wanted to explore with you. And of course, I think it really touches on what people have been curious about. The science is unfolding. The scientists are working really well together, but the government response are so different. Based on the same scientific evidence. You've highlighted a few of these things like decreased multilateralism, increased authoritarian regimes, underpreparedness in terms of public health infrastructure. I wondered whether you wanted to also make any comments about the role of the media and the way it influences culture. I mean, I'm fascinated the way, we often think Australia, UK, US, culturally not that different from each other. Yet the Australian community seems to have really come together and not have been so divided with the various debates. I wondered if you wanted to make any comments about maybe it's the relationship with our government and the institutions, or maybe culturally Australia is distinct. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's hard to generalize. Kamalini Lokuge, who's a associate professor and a public health expert at the Australian National University, and she's one of the few people in Australia with significant pandemic experience. Unfortunately, the Australian government, the people who are advising the national government, don't have much non-influenza pandemic experience. And she helped to control the Ebola outbreak in Liberia a few years ago. And her argument is that no pandemic has ever been controlled by a government. It's communities that control it. So what you saw, so I think you saw it in Hong Kong too, and you saw it in South Korea and you saw it in Taiwan, is that the communities understood what was going to happen and they were ahead of government. And that was certainly true. So business actually was well ahead of government in Australia. They were already telling people to work from home, don't travel so much, and setting up for social distancing. The community was already reducing their mobility well before the government started doing it. The state government started doing that too. So community is important. Culture is important. The United States did very badly in the 1918-19 pandemic. And they're obviously doing very badly during this pandemic. And one reason for that, there's many reasons for that, but at the moment it's because there's no trust in leadership. There's poor leadership, it's fragmented. There's no healthcare system to speak of. It's fragmented healthcare system. There's no network of general practitioners like you have in Hong Kong, and we have in Australia. Inheritance actually from the British system. There's none of that. But also you've got a culture of individualism. It's said, and I once saw the data, but I'm trying to find it again, I haven't been able to find it, is that when you look at the prisoner of war camps in Second World War in Europe, the Americans had a higher mortality rate than the British and the Australians. And people put that down to the fact that they were so individualistic. They weren't looking after each other to the same extent as British and Australian troops did. They don't have a sense of community. And I'm preaching to the choir here, not only talking to Australians, expatriates, I'm talking to people who are Hong Kongers, where you've got a very strong sense of community. You don't have to explain that to people either in China or Hong Kong because they are such coherent communities who act together. And so that is definitely that this individualism worked against, saying we're not going to wear masks, you can't force us what to do, and so on and so forth. But it's not the whole story, but it is, the culture is part of it. The media plays a role, and in Australia there was, I think, a bit of conflict with the federal government, where I think they felt that the ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, as a publicly funded broadcaster, should be towing the line and giving out public health messages and uncritically, and they didn't like the fact that they were being criticised for their public health effort. And I certainly personally was put under a lot of pressure. In Australia, there hasn't been much misinformation or bad information out in the media. It's been pretty responsible, but it's not always followed the government line. Whereas in America, you've just got such a fragmented media landscape that, and people watching their own media and believing what they hear from Fox or even worse, Breitbart, then that really leads a very large percentage of the population astray. And there are people who believe that what President Trump said was true. So he didn't wear a mask, he went out and did stuff, that was what they should be doing.
So glad you mentioned the issue of the media. I mean, this pandemic has also been described as a period of an infodemic, far too much information. And of course, we've all heard about conspiracy theories and so on and so forth. So I'm curious, you know, you're a communicator extraordinaire and certainly very much a trusted voice in this. But how do we actually communicate, you know, get journalists not to use the word deadly before the word virus? And that's what was happening in the first few months. It was like every single article just said deadly virus. And now we see the mutant strain. I mean, these are quite emotive sort of words, yet the science is complicated. How you manage it is complicated. How do we...
Sorry to interrupt, but I differ with you on this, Vivian.
Okay.
It is a deadly virus. It's probably 10 times more deadly than seasonal influenza. A lot of people are dying. There are mutant viruses around. I notice here that Andy Yang has asked Mickey Mehta's asked here just on the question, they can comment on the UK variant of COVID-19. So what's happened with this virus is that viruses mutate. So I actually think, and I'm doing this podcast now for nearly a year, several hundred episodes, and the number of questions coming in have not diminished. But the questions are, and it's from a very broad spectrum of the community, highly literate. People know what our values are. I mean, my God, you know, I had to dig early on to my final year medicine to remember what an R value was. But people just trips off the tongue. They understand that a virus mutates, and they kind of understand evolution. So that the virus doesn't have a brain, it's not mutating deliberately. But what is happening is, and it's happened since probably April, is that the virus mutants, they are mutants, not necessarily strains, there's lots and lots of mutants, hundreds of thousands of them, but some of them are being preferentially preserved because we've changed our behavior. So we've socially distanced, we've isolated ourselves. The virus is programmed for survival, and the mutants that survive best, in other words, are most contagious, survive better. So you've got the D version, kind of 614 or something like that. So that was a bit more contagious. And now you've got around the world, and it's actually, so it is scary actually. So you've got what's called convergent evolution. So from the Australians in the audience, you've got marsupials, just changing the subject slightly, you've got marsupials in Australia and you've got marsupials in South America. Now that's not because a kangaroo jumped on a log and floated across the Pacific. It's called convergent evolution. Marsupials evolved simultaneously because the environments were similar. And what you've got now are variants popping up around the world that are not, yes, that once they popped up, they do spread, but their origins are they popped up simultaneously in Brazil, maybe South Africa, maybe Britain, and then they start spreading because they're more contagious, and they're starting to mutate around the mutants around the variants. So it turns out, and this is Andy Yang's question as well, would you kind of give your thoughts about herd immunity, anti-vaxxers, and the vaccine hesitant? So I'll come to that in a second, is that, so you're starting to see, particularly in the South African virus, some vaccine resistance. So today, Novavax released, this was one of the vaccines, released its phase 3 study, showed huge effectiveness outside, around the world, but in South Africa, only 60% effectiveness. They're already showing that it's vaccine resistant. So these are important questions. You know, Andy's question, give your thoughts about herd immunity, anti-vaccine, the vaccine hesitant. So herd immunity only matters really if the vaccines don't, vaccines stop transmission, and we don't know whether they do that yet. But there's a fascinating paper in the Lancet this week from South America, from Brazil, of a city in Brazil where there is 76% level of antibodies in the community, 76%. And yet they've gone from 500 cases in hospital in December to 3,400 in the first 19 days of January, with 76% herd immunity. So whether these vaccines are actually going to prevent transmission so that's an unvaccinated community. So herd immunity is not necessarily, so you're right when you said there's so much to learn, but I don't think that you can hide the fact that this is actually a bit scary and a bit depressing.
So if this convergent evolution keeps happening, what's COVID normal looking like? Can you see what 2022, 23 will be like? You know, a lot of people are thinking vaccination is going to be the magic bullet and life will go back and we can all travel again, etc. What's your prediction about how we learn to live in the future?
So the variables here are the effectiveness of the vaccines and how quickly you can immunize most of your populations. So for example, the Astra vaccine has about 62% effectiveness, according to published trials. In order to, if it does present transmission, it probably does, most of them will probably do that, you've got to immunize nearly 100% of your population to get herd immunity. With the Pfizer vaccine, 95%, you've got to probably just immunize 70% of the population to get herd immunity. So how quickly you can get these vaccines out, and they're all suffering from supply problems because there's no inventory. They haven't built up a stock and then they're putting stock out there. So when you get the influenza immunization, every country builds up a stock of influenza vaccine and then distributes it. That's not happening. This is all just-in-time manufacture. As soon as they make it, it's shipped and it's out there for use. So how quickly you can immunize not just the rich world, but the low to middle income countries as well, is going to be critical. And so, you know, what could happen is that we get a significant percentage of populations immunized. We show that transmission is being reduced, and that's beginning to see that in Israel. And I noticed that David Ferguson here is asking about vaccination certificates. If they do reduce transmission and you've had a high efficacy vaccine, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to have an electronic passport to say, you know, you're safe to come back to Australia. We're not worried about you because you're not going to necessarily get infected and pass it on. But we don't know that yet. So it's really the unknown. So my prediction is by 2022, we'll have our act together. Large proportions of the populations will be immunized, and that's when we can start moving. But I'm not confident we can start doing that in this 12 months, desperate though I am to see my youngest daughter and my son.
So do you think we will learn lessons globally and be prepared for the next one?
I wish that was true. We still have authoritarian regimes which are nervous, don't want to open up their borders. And it's really the fragile personalities who are running some of the very important nations in the world where they're feeling insecure and they don't want to be open. And you're seeing that around the world, not, you know, and it's true in democracies as well. And what you've seen in Britain, I mean, it's appalling what's happened in Britain. It's just terrible governance. So people might go on about China or Russia or United States with Trump, but it's just so complicated and the politics are there. And I'm not sure they have learned it. I think that the Biden administration coming in, you'll start to see American leadership coming in back and probably calling WHO to heel and getting better performance out of WHO, badly needed. They've got a lot to answer for and they're so desperately needed. Those are good signs, and you have a more mature international conversation rather than thinking, well, just because a virus happened to originate in China, that China should feel nervous about that. New viruses have emerged in Australia. You know, we've got the Hendra virus in Australia. They're emerging in sub-Saharan Africa all the time. China is not alone in this, and no nation can feel smug or secure. It can happen anywhere.
So you mentioned that the Australian success was driven more by the state premiers than the Commonwealth. So would the world be better off if we had more federalist countries? Is that a general matter of principle?
Well, the Lowy Institute argues not, that you can't generalize like that. The political system does not necessarily predict how well a country does. And people can go into the Lowy Institute's website and see that report. It's really quite an interesting report. It's more about public health response. It's about public trust. It's about having a manageable population size. But even the United States, 300 odd million people, has got a manageable population size because you could just divide it up into jurisdictions. And what it says in Australia is that the federal system works. It worked for Australia. That tension between the states and the federal government worked in favor of the community, because in the Australian context, see, the Commonwealth, doesn't matter what political party that is in power. Commonwealth doesn't run anything. It runs the Defence Force. And that's about it. You know, it doesn't even run universities, even though it funds them. So it doesn't know how to run things. It's quite good at policy. States run stuff. And that's where the buck stops. And that's where, you know, and they stepped up to the mark because they knew they had to carry the can.
I wonder if I can just join you now both and ask a question that I think we'd all like to hear. Are you both going to have the vaccine? And if so, is there one you wouldn't like to take? Norman.
So I'll go first if you like, Vivian. So I'll have any vaccine that's got good randomized control trial evidence. And the shame is that a couple of the Chinese vaccines look quite good, but they've not had good randomized trials. They've been too hurried, too nervous, not open enough, and therefore we won't really know. You know, it looks as though one of the Sinovac vaccines has 78% efficacy. Probably right, actually, but it's a killed vaccine. And the Russian one is probably quite a good vaccine, but again, not had a proper, I mean, it's a tragedy. You know, these scientists in Moscow or wherever it is producing this vaccine, which really is probably a good vaccine, but they've not been able to do a proper randomized trial. So I'll have Pfizer, I'll have Astra, I'll have Moderna, I'll have the Novavax, and you know, if the Chinese or Russian ones had a good, you know, have a good randomized trial showing similar evidence, I'd have one of them too.
Yeah, for me, I would also take any vaccine where the data has become public so that we actually have full confidence that the trials have been properly done. If I were in Hong Kong, in Australia, I think any would be fine. I trust there would be a prioritization process so that the people who need them the most will get them first. So I'm happy to wait for my turn. Now, if I were in a lower middle income country, I would be worried about the cold chain being maintained for some of the new technology vaccines, because getting -80 freezers is not necessarily what can happen. So this also goes back to this issue about the international cooperation that really needs to happen on the vaccine front. But for me personally, I think I'm in the lucky group.
And Vivian, perhaps just staying with you for a moment too, we talked about the need for people to be willing to come forward to take the vaccines. And we've seen a growing number of anti-vaxxers really rife, particularly fueled by social media, which we've touched on. Vivian, you talked about the importance of community engagement. Norman, you touched on this as well. And you referenced the Australian experience during tackling AIDS. Do you want to just perhaps share that again in your thoughts as a public health expert and looking particularly at health systems? Just quickly share your observations there.
Look, I think, you know, Australia has been internationally very successful in terms of HIV prevention and control. And one of the things that Australia did very early that's a real model is to work with the community through community organizations. It was really a recognition in that particular case that many of the affected communities cannot be reached very easily by governments. And I think this goes to the heart of the question of trust that Norman talked about. So we can take that same issue about trust in social institutions and think, okay, we need to understand the fault lines in our various communities. And I think COVID has actually revealed the fault lines very clearly. So I think governments really need to learn about which are the most effective organizations they should be working with to reach different parts of the community. So I think that's one of the lessons for public health and that governments really need to take on seriously.
Norman, did you want to contribute?
Well, we came close in Australia to having, you know, a bad response to, because the Hawke government was wanting to clamp down on drug use. They were very uncomfortable about the sort of community-based activities that Vivian was talking about. I mean, they had caravans out at the wall in East Sydney teaching male prostitutes how to hold condoms in their mouth. And, and they basically kept that secret from government, because if they'd known that, we had needle exchanges. In New York City, by contrast, they had levels of HIV spread that were only equaled by Kinshasa, which was AIDS central in the Democratic Republic of Congo. That's where AIDS began, was Kinshasa. And in the whole of New York City, there was one needle exchange. We had needle exchanges in every corner pharmacy. We just rolled that out without moral judgment, and we succeeded. And other countries followed us, like Thailand and other countries. They saw what we could do and got it under control.
Interesting. I guess turning now back to Hong Kong specifically, a question that many of our members are struggling with and businesses are struggling with is the imposition of the mandatory 3-week quarantine here. Can I ask both of you, is there any medical justification for extending the quarantine from 2 weeks to 3?
It might be easier for me to answer that than Vivian, but I'll. So the incubation period of the virus is maybe between 5 and 8 days, somewhere around that. Now, in some people, if you isolate somebody for 14 days, you will miss a very small percentage of people, but there haven't been many cases which have escaped quarantine, which have escaped quarantine after 14 days, 1 or 2, but not many when you look internationally. So there, in theory, there's a rationale for 3 weeks, which is that if you do 3 weeks, you'll capture 99.99999%, and if you do 2 weeks, you'll capture 99% probably. And in some countries go to 10 days, which is probably too short, but 14 days internationally looks, that's what New Zealand does and others, and it's you will capture most people, particularly if you do a test at the beginning and a test at about 10 days of a proper PCR test. So 3 weeks is over-engineering it, would be my sense. And it's very, very tough on people.
Vivian.
Look, in many ways, I mean, you'd say quarantine is actually kind of a medieval tool of public health, right? I mean, we've been using it for a very, very long time. It works. It's administratively easy. But I think from a public health viewpoint, you want a more risk-based approach. And with better testing, with vaccinations, with being able to monitor people, electronic surveillance, there's all kinds of different tools that can be in play. It's just administratively not as simple as everybody from every country, regardless of risk, get locked in. So I think one would ideally prefer a more sophisticated approach.
I think certainly the Chamber here would be very keen to see the Hong Kong government introduce a more risk-based approach when they're looking at jurisdictions that might open up to travel, for example, from Singapore, Australia and New Zealand. We'd love to see that happen, and we are engaging with the government on that issue. One final question. Again, I know there are lots coming through, but we do need to let you both go. And Norman, you touched on this in terms of the ventilation being an impact, but here in Hong Kong, just in the last few days, we've seen the Hong Kong government impose these random lockdowns of certain buildings and blocks in some of the world's most densely populated areas. And the concern is that there's this vertical transmission of COVID down these older tenement style buildings. Would you like to, do you have an observation you could share on that, Norman, or is that too specific to Hong Kong?
Well, I can't comment on thing, but the sort of Hong Kong experienced that before during SARS-1. So you had an apartment block where there was a lot of transmission in hospitals as well. So Hong Kong's experienced that before. If you've got a block where you've got shared air circulation and you've got positive people in it, you will run the risk of getting spread. And lockdown could make it worse, actually, because you're holding people in there, and therefore you've got non-infected people who become infected. It's what you call a wicked problem, because there's not an easy answer for it in densely populated areas. But once it gets into those dense populations, it can run riot. And I'm sure the Hong Kong authorities are scared of what could happen in some of those blocks. And you see them Hong Kong's just full of them, and very hard, and maybe even some blocks that are not so old but are expensive. The air circulation might not be so clear. So I don't know what the solution is, but it's hard. And they had it in Melbourne too, under old blocks there, where you had some infection, and they did manage to control it. And I'm not sure there was any internal infection, but it was a very difficult situation. And and it's unfortunate if there is spread there, because Hong Kong's done so well up till now.
Vivian.
Well, I think some of that lockdown is, there's different types of lockdown, because right now they're just trying to lock them down shortly to grab everybody for testing, because they have had the testing schemes, they've picked up people, and they've had higher rates in some places. So I think it really is about trying to get much better testing. And of course, after testing, you've actually got to then provide the care and treat, rather than just lock people up as well. So I think there are different forms of lockdowns.
So, I mean, what they did in Wuhan, Hong Kong, you don't have the space necessary to do. What they did in Wuhan is they built hospitals for COVID-19 positive people. Now, very clever thing to do, because it means you don't actually have to quarantine, you don't have to separate people. If everybody's COVID-19 positive, they can walk around, they can do what they like. You're not worried about spread apart from to staff. So you could remove people from there into a COVID positive environment where they would be much freer. But, can you do that in Hong Kong? There's just not the wide open space.
We have had temporary hospital facilities, if you like, set up for asymptomatic positive cases, where people are staying temporarily in the Asia World Expo, the exhibition hall. And again, Vivian, we've talked about Hong Kong's got an excellent medical system, but sometimes the patient-centric approach is lacking. So you've got people staying out in an exhibition hall with no natural lights on for 24 hours a day. It's a really tough gig, and we haven't even really touched on the psychological toll of all of this. But Norman, I know we need to let you go. I'm sure you have other commitments with the ABC. I did want to thank you both very much for joining us. Again, a big thank you to the ABC for making you available to us, Norman. It's been really interesting. And before you go, we do want to, you've talked about your son, Jonathan. Many of us here have been following Jonathan's now famous interview with President Trump, in which your son became a meme, and that quizzical expression, I imagine as a father, you're probably very familiar with. So those of you who don't know, Jonathan Swan, Norman's son, is a journalist covering the White House for Axios, and it's a classic interview if you haven't watched it. So again, thank you very much, Dr. Norman.
I'll just explain that expression on his face has been there since the age of about 3, whenever he's been told what to do.
Fantastic. I thought it might have been. You must have loved to see that as a meme. It really is wonderful. Vivian Lin, thank you very much. Norman Swan, thank you for joining us. Please stay with us now, because we're going to be moving on to Alisa Camplin. So thank you, Vivian. Thank you, Norman Swan. Conclude. We do have our chairman, Andrew McIntosh, who's going to wrap up and thank our sponsors. But I do just want to also announce that we're delighted to have Robert Penfold, who would be known to many of you as the Channel 9 journalist who's been covering the US for close to 3 decades. And of course, there's been no more interesting and challenging time to do that in the last year. So we're delighted that Robert's going to join us from the US to give us an overview and an assessment of what his time has been like, and particularly covering the Trump White House, but also what the new Biden administration holds. That will be February the 10th. But Andrew, please, I know Alisa's a hard act to follow, but if I can now turn to you, please, to close. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jacinta. She certainly is. She certainly is. Thank you, Alisa, for just a truly inspiring those words. Your journey is just a truly an amazing one, and something that we can all as Australians be proud of. I also want to thank Farhan at ANZ, Wendy at CKI for their support of this event and their continuing support as Platinum patrons as well. Without the support of them and others like them, then the Chamber would be struggling. It's really a testament to the mateship of Australians, particularly on Australia Day, of all of us that have come together, both for this event and throughout the year. I want to thank ABC as well, long-standing partners of the Chamber, for their support. I want to thank our speakers, Elizabeth, Norman, Vivian, and of course, Alisa, for their inspiring perspectives. We've heard some very different messages today, but I think the common thing is just the way they inspire all of us as the ways that we can celebrate being Australian, what it means to be an Australian, particularly in these times. And finally, I want to thank all of you that have chosen to celebrate Australia Day with us today. It is an unusual virtual event, but I think it's been a really terrific one. And so I want to thank all of the audience, our members, the Chamber. We're intensely proud to represent all of you in Hong Kong. So my thanks to all of you, and wish you all a wonderful Australia Day and wherever you are. So thank you.